Hey, how's it going guys? It's Nate here. And I've said it before, Skyrim is the host of a massive modding scene. With dozens of community creations releasing every day, and of the thousands of mods currently on the Nexus and Bethesda.net, many of them are huge DLC-sized expansions, with as much work put into them as official developer content. However, there's also a handful of planned DLC-sized mods and expansions that were put into development that ended up getting cancelled and never seen the light of day. A good portion of these cancelled behemoth-esque mods were fairly deep into development too, and already had trailers produced, and some even formed small communities as they generated hype. Alas, 'twas not to be, as the modders behind these projects either got bored or had something come up. So today we'll be taking a look at 5 of Skyrim's biggest cancelled mods that never were. Now, real quick before we begin, please do keep in mind, all of these modders were, or are, literally working for free. I see a lot of people in discussions about these projects, trying to insinuate that the modders were lazy or something to that effect for discontinuing their mods. That is fundamentally not the case. These modders can oftentimes literally spend hours working on these projects, away from their families or jobs or what have you, just to release these completely free projects that they're not getting paid for. So while I think all of us would have loved to see a lot of these projects come out, it's very important that we wish the modders behind them well in whatever they decided to pursue. Many of the modders are still within Skyrim's modding scene, just working on other things and still producing stuff for the community. Regardless, wish them the best. But with that out of the way, without further ado, let's do further. Starting off, we have Lufthrin. I think I pronounced that properly, it's Dwemerish. Lufthrin was a mod beginning development in 2012, aiming to introduce an enormous new city and surrounding region in an area northwest of Skyrim. Altogether, the new world space introduced by this mod would have been about as large as one of Skyrim's holds. However, everything would have been considerably more dense. The city was planned to be 3 times the size of Whiterun itself, and the area around it would be loaded with a plethora of dungeons and minor locations to explore. Lufthrin would also come with its own main quest line, as well as an abundance of side quests for the player to partake in. The main quest line itself was going to span 15 to 20 quests, and could be experienced from one of 2 competing factions, the ruling class or the rebels. Sound a little familiar? The modders made a point of trying to keep everything as lore-friendly as possible, building the city in a way that didn't conflict with Elder Scrolls lore, and then using the Elder Scrolls' pre-existing storyline as a platform to work off of. So while officially there is no actual city called Lufthrin in Elder Scrolls lore, the modders wanted to try and make it fit. Additional plans included for there to be an arena within the city's center, as well as multiple new potential player homes. Alas, in November of 2015, 3 years after they began development, the project lead decided to resign, and a few months later, the team came to a decision to cancel the mod altogether, stating they all had other interests, and began to feel that the mod had become too big to complete without their old lead. But not all was entirely lost. Certain assets made for the mod were given to other modders and found their way into different projects, such as TW Warrior's Better Cities. So, good on the team for that final gesture. Next on our list is Awake, the Rise of Mannimarco. This mod had some huge excitement around it and great talent behind it since it was announced in early 2014. Awake, the Rise of Mannimarco was meant to take players on a journey surrounding the alleged return of Mannimarco, an extremely powerful Altmer necromancer in Elder Scrolls lore that players of Oblivion, Arena, or even the Elder Scrolls Online are probably already very familiar with. We were never given too much information on the exact storyline, other than, surprise, Mannimarco's back! However, it was made clear that Awake was meant to be a horror and story-driven project, placing a huge emphasis on creating spooky environments, encounters, and a rich plotline that could be influenced by player choice. The mod team themselves described it as a story-driven and character-focused project. Mannimarco's trailer showed off some of the mod's custom voice assets and promising new environments that it created. Again, I must mention, one of the biggest things this mod had going for it was its incredibly talented development team behind it. With folks like Tendo and Eleonora. She's actually still modding and was even recently accepted into the Creation Club, just to name a couple. Unfortunately, despite having a pretty amazing trailer out and an estimated release date of June 6th of 2016, the project was delayed and then sort of died down after the project lead, Apollo Down, a talented modder in his own right, decided to leave the modding scene, and the remaining team members decided to go a separate way from the looks of it. There is no official statement on exactly when development stopped, as it does seem the team continued for some time after Apollo Down left, but according to him on his own YouTube channel, the project is pretty much over. For third spot, Wrath of the Nord was, or is, we'll get to that in a moment, the upcoming sequel to Blood of the Nord. Blood of the Nord was a very much released quest mod by some guy 2000 that dealt with the aftermath of a Stormcloak victory in Skyrim Civil War, and what that meant for the province going forward, as it explored the aftermath and conflicts between different Stormcloak factions and the Thalmor's inevitable anger. Blood of the Nord was understandably pretty popular, so when its author announced an upcoming sequel, Wrath of the Nord, people got very hyped. Not a lot of detail was given regarding the exact storyline behind Wrath of the Nord, but it seemed obvious that it would be a continuation of the war with the Thalmor that was initiated, but never finished, in its predecessor. And no one really likes the Thalmor. Like its predecessor, Wrath of the Nord would have a fully voiced cast of new NPCs, new weapons, and a handful of new dungeons and locations added into Skyrim. Now, oddly, unlike others on this list, Wrath of the Nord was never formally cancelled at all, but the mod author just sort of disappeared from the Nexus, and it's been about 2 years since the last update. And about the same time of the last update, 2 years ago, the mod author announced work on a different project called Thirskmead Saga, which he intends to complete before Wrath of the Nord, and that's still not out yet. I've reached out to some guy on Twitter. I'll post a pinned comment if he gets back to me. This mod may not be cancelled, but it's likely quite a few years away. Coming at number 4, we have I Am the King. I Am the King's development began in 2012, and it was set to introduce a new playable area on the border between High Rock and Skyrim, complete with a collection of its own cities, villages, forts, dungeons, and everything in between. This region specifically would be called New High Rock, and the modders imagined it as a kingdom that broke away from the Empire following the Oblivion Crisis, and developed more of an independent culture and government than that of its neighbors. Now, of course, strictly according to Elder Scrolls lore, this never actually happened. But like Lefteran, I Am the King isn't inherently sticking to the lore 100%, and is breaking off at times, instead preferring to coexist in conjunction with it, essentially making their mod lore compatible, if you will. In I Am the King, the Dragonborn would get the opportunity to work their way up New High Rock's political hierarchy, which was heavily modeled based off of medieval Europe. The modders even went so far as to call their mod a mesh between Elder Scrolls and the medieval ages. The player would be given the chance to become a noble knight, great enchanter, or even king himself, hence the name, depending on the choices that they made. No statement was given on exactly how big the lands that this mod added in would be, though trailers and images posted by the developers showed off a variety of huge castles, cities, and landscapes that implies it would have been quite big. Unfortunately, in late 2015, nearly 3 years after development started, the team stopped posting updates on ModDB, and in 2017, the project lead announced they would publish what they had and allow other modders to use the resources and perhaps even complete it. But that was the last we ever heard, and from the looks of it, this never actually materialized. But whatever it is the modders moved on to, we do wish them the best. And finally, last on our list, the Skyrim Settlement and City Overhaul was an ambitious mod that began its development in late 2016, and it sought to radically expand and enhance many of Skyrim's cities, with the aim of making each one around 1.5 times bigger, as well as creating a variety of custom assets for each settlement to make all of Skyrim's towns and cities feel more unique. A number of other additions were also planned, such as adding in new shops like tailors and banks, as well as larger, more distinct farms. The author, Steve-O Was Here, previously had worked on Holds, the City Overhaul, a mod with a similar objective, as well as created a series of his own mods called Spice of Life, which, again, did something very similar at a much smaller scale. The mod author certainly had talent behind him, and many people were very excited. But before long in 2017, Steve-O Was Here decided to leave Skyrim modding, saying that he wanted to focus on other things and close this chapter in his life. Out of all the mods on this list, the Skyrim Settlement and City Overhaul mod was certainly the least into development at the time of its cancellation. However, that said, despite that, I still would have really liked to see this mod released and see what the mod author was really thinking. Bethesda rightfully gets a lot of flack for designing Skyrim settlements and towns way too small for them to be considered in any way realistic. So I would have really enjoyed to see Steve-O's take on it all, considering his experience. Regardless, in the description down below, I will leave a link to Holds the City Overhaul mod, which again Steve-O did work on, as that still did a pretty good job at addressing some of those criticisms. But with that, we are going to wrap up. Thanks for stopping by, everyone. Which of the mods on this list do you wish were released the absolute most? And what mods currently in development are you most excited for? Leave a comment down below. As I always say, like ratings are very much appreciated, and I hope to see you all in my next video. Peace out, everyone.